literature and composition with a story from the collection by Langston Hughes, the book being The Best Short Stories by Jean Tomer. This story, Fern, is from a collection of Tomer's work, which is called Cain. It's a book of short stories to you, because it is an extraordinary piece of writing that he does. And in this story, since we're only reading one for this discussion, you need to be thinking about some of the things. Poeticisms, a lot of imagery, and a very compacted style of writing. So the reading of this story in order to understand a lot of what he is saying, and it would probably require more than one reading as well. So when you think of Fern and Tomer, you want to think of but there is just a wealth of material that should get your attention in terms of analysis. And while I'm thinking analysis, I want to look here on the board for a short story analysis. And that is, they want me to pull my tie down, and that is character, conflict, climax. Say it again, because when you internalize this visualization, you will find that it works. By that we mean character, name the conflict that the main character confronts. At the point of climax, determine whether the main character is a success or whether what the author is saying, that is the theme of the story, which we'll do with this story as we look at it. In the story Fern, we have and you'll notice right away, after the second reading at least, that the storyteller does not have a name. Now, when that's the case, you want to person in that story is for us a symbol of what is our story. This is a story for women especially. Why? Because the character, the man, the character in this story is without a name. Now the author could have and he didn't do that for a reason, and that is this man is symbolic of what women have to face. So you want to remember. We have the first paragraph devoted to a description of Fern. We have her has this very Semitic nose. Your teacher grew up in Topeka, Kansas with and then this was a quality that Fern has. Now the author says this 3 times at the beginning of this story. And what he means with that is a major aspect of this young woman, that is, she is for sure a mixed blood young woman in the South, American history and what that means in the context of a young backwoods, a pretty available girl. It means that she would be a young woman that men would bring themselves to. Men were attracted to her because they saw her and they read into, they looked at her and they saw that she would not deny them. What they did was read says, they felt bound to her. They felt as though there was something with lifetime fulfillment obligation, something he would have to do for her. The reason for that, involved with her sexually long before she was ready for that. And whenever you find a young girl, as Fern is in this story, 12, 13 years old, being, and of course that's what's happening in this story. And out of that abuse comes the guilt that men feel when they have dealt with her and and this whole section is then a description of this face of our friend Fern and the way she looked, and also unfulfilled state of the men who brought their bodies to her. It is the quintessence of what is wrong with premature. This is the beginning of this story. Fern got tired of them. She became a virgin, and that's really hard to do, but it's a poeticism, it is a literary license. And so she sits on her front porch with her head tilted. You remember the story, there's a nail right behind the place where she sits. Well, if you sat there every day, the same thing. But Fern just sat there with her head tilted so it didn't hit the nail. At least she wasn't that far gone emotionally. But we see here at the beginning of this story a young woman who, and we know what is she struggling with. Already we see that the antagonists are these men, this culture of men who, culture using the terms of something you'd have, uninvited, and in a way that is abusive and unfulfilling. The proof of that is they are and so we now know that she's struggling with these kind of sexist men, and sexism would be the thing that we say that is the man who tells the story enters the picture at this point. And in the next paragraph, you have what looks like a discussion of our friend Fern. Telling the story. Remember, he is a symbol of something. We said that. He is nameless. And if you look at this section, there is this pronoun, the I pronoun. It's Tomer's way of saying this man is egotistical at a level where it is a major part of who he is, all going back. Egotistical. This is something women have to watch out for. The man who is so egotistical that there's not room for her in his life, in his person. He says he saw her and he thinks, well, something I would do for her. He thinks of himself, his body, sex, in other words. And then he begins to think, he says, well, wait a minute. Poor girl, pretty girl, available girl in the South at this time, having somebody not going to be nude. And so he thinks, well, and I like that word, he thinks, what can I do that's going to be new, that's going to be interesting, that's going to be different, that's going to says I can talk to her. And this is a turning point in the story, we hope. We say, look, this man is finally beginning to see what is about. And so he decides that the thing he can do that our friend Fern has never had any experience with is to talk to her. Well, for sure, come to her and actually talk. idea was novel. And he goes, you know the story. He goes to her home, the people move so he can sit down, and he does in fact talk. He says, would you know how to start? Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, people, the weather, the crops, the new preacher, the frolic, the church benefit, rabbit. What kind of town Macon was, Negroes migration north, boll weevil, syrup, the Bible. To all these things, she gave a yassa or a nossa without further comment. She doesn't know how to respond. And he thinks he's losing his touch. So he volunteers what many men have volunteered their bodies to her, of course. And she's familiar with it. And reticent to accept the offer because we said, you know, earlier she'd become a virgin. She'd stopped being sexual. Man offers something different. He actually tries to talk to her. And now he does something that you may be sure no man has ever done with her before, and that is he looks her in the eye. How many times do you think Fern has had a guy look her in the eye? I just saw a show on TV, I mentioned this in class the other day. A man was trying to of course they were brown, which means she said, get out of here. She hit him with something. For the very reason, he hadn't even looked at her. So this is new for our discomfort is the thing that made his throat catch disappear. The element in their contacting each other that made him uncomfortable made a connection that said, I understand that you promised me something that I don't know, and I'm willing to take a chance on you. You see, at this point, and for a man to come and get her to actually say, yes, I will go with you, he's got to do something unusual. And he has done it. He's talked to her, tried to, between them. And she agrees to go. And we hear her say something for the first time, and it is, doesn't it make you mad? And that line with information. What do we know? We know that Fern knows that people are talking about her business. And she's angry about it. She involved in something that is none of their business. They go for their walk. They cross the canebrake. Now in Tomer, if you've been reading a lot of his stories, you know anytime the is going to happen, and something is going to happen that is going to be destructive to the characters. It is a line that people cross where bad ensues here. But it ensues because this man is a symbol of what's there. The man with an danger that women face in our culture. The egotistical man. And that's what our friend they come to the edge of the creek, the branch. They sit on the beach, on the bank of the creek. And it says, even noticing that he had done that. And you gasped when you read that. You said, oh no, man, what is this? Why? Different kind of experience. And at that moment, when he put his arm around Fern, without being invited to do so, without at that that moment, he looks to Fern exactly like every other man who has come by the pike. How would you feel if you were Fern in that setting, after being promised something and then having that something a different experience? No, I had put my arm around her. Something thoughtless as that happening to you. Well, you know the story. It's wide and weird. She's in shock. She's amazed. She is chagrined. She's frightened. She's confused. She is distraught. Lied to and betrayed in this instance of his thoughtless behavior. Again, we the thoughtless behavior, not the thoughtful behavior. The thoughtful behavior got him. What can I do to relate to this person, Fern? Not to Jenny gal, but this girl. What can I do to relate to her? Well, talk. I looked her in the eye. Going on here. He thoughtfully said, here's a way to approach this. But at the moment he put his arm around her, he stopped thinking. Always the potential for the relationship here. She has a fit. She screams, she runs away from him, she foams at the mouth, I call that a fit. And he takes her back to town. And the next thing we know, he's right. Says, there must have been something that I did. That line is very revealing, whereas here I should find it and say to you, her eyes are usually weird and open. Must have done something. What? I don't know. Everybody read that. If you could read that and didn't tick mark that in your book, you're not reading this story very carefully. That's a major egotism. He didn't even know what he did. The women your teacher has known, and we're talking here deep in the double digits, that they're angry with and they don't want anything more to do with, following this guy, the guy that did something, and she tried to explain to him what he did, and he ends up saying, I don't know what this. Here's a guy with the potential to save Fern and give himself something he wanted, a relationship with this beautiful girl. Take the idea and stay in the thinking mode through the fulfillment of what he is intending to do here with our friend Fern. Sitting in the same place with a head cocked like this, only this time, not only is the countryside flowing into her eyes, the beginning of the story, but God is flowing in as if she is. But there's an irony here that here's a man who had the potential to help her, actually makes her less well off. The irony is he could have helped her, understood it, but didn't and couldn't. Fern is devastated. The main character in this story. Well, those are things we ask when we look at our visualization. We know Fern is an issue, or even if we said the main character were good answers. The conflict is still sexism, and the impact of it, and the power of it, and or his egotism, combination of the same thing. Is he a success or is she a success? Well, the answer is no on every level, and therefore the idea of this story is to do it thoughtfully, and you can't stop thinking once you start thinking. You can't stop being good once you've been good. You have Lady College, and he said to me in tears, everybody wants me to be good, Gardenhire. I said, well, that's the price of doing it well all the time. Great responsibility. It's not an easy thing. It's not a simple thing. You have to get into the adult mode and stay there. You can't go back to being a child or back to being in the thoughtful mode when you're dealing in a relationship. And this man could have been a success. The irony is he had the potential, but he didn't. The effect is he loses the potential for a relationship, and she loses her sanity. And the author says, Tomer says, don't do that. You get a commitment made, you have to follow the commitment. You have to follow it to the end. You have to be that person that you promised to be. If you live in a culture, the story and the literature ought to be things you ought to be learning things that you can apply to your life. That's what this story is about. And that's what we'll look at. Now, an essay for this story. And if we want to do that, the question would be, why does Fern have a fit? And if Fern had a fit, well, the question begins with the word why, and you know that those questions are motivational questions, are background or hidden baggage questions, or it is the betrayal that she felt. And if I were writing this, I would say something like, the storyteller's betrayal of Fern made her have a fit. Which you always want as the subject of your thesis. I would say, what is a betrayal? Well, if you're talking about a betrayal, and I had a class in front of me that defines a betrayal. Deception is an aspect of betrayal. And when you think of definition, you want to think, what are the parts of that deception and trickery and promises as well? You have to make a promise to betray somebody, don't you? If you don't have a promise, you don't have a betrayal. He promised. Write these things down. If I were on a board, I would write my definition there so I know what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, just quick, those are really ugly numbers, but the principle is betrayal. Then what's involved in it? Trickery. Whatever you brainstorm in definition of your key word. If it's betrayal, as it is here, that's what you do. Then you would go to which is the cause of it. The same thing, 3, 4. Just quick, if you get 5 or 6, you probably get a hernia. You don't need to get this is not brain surgery. Betrayal. Well, this man's history, his culture, his egotism, You might put, and then when you're writing this in your essay, you would want to decide which one of these parallel terms am I. And then there would be a concatenation of a connection and a line between the use of the parallel terms that you, this is when you get sophisticated in the writing. But my point is you want to bring it to work from when you're writing. You never want to write the expository essay from a blank piece of paper. This keeps you from having that happen. With your paper. Then you want to talk about brainstorm the effect. Well, one effect, because she went crazy, right? Madness, insane. How about shock? How about losses? Because everybody. This allows you to tell what you know. That's the beauty of the expository essay. It allows you to tell what you know. You don't have to guess what somebody